My name is Ben Winters, and the PAD taught me the joy of collaboration.
My guest today on the PAD podcast is a talented author, novelist, television writer, producer, comic book writer, and creator of original audio content, Ben Winters. Ben H. Winters, WashU PAD alum. We talk a little bit about his time at WashU, of course, and his involvement in Mama's Pot Roast. But he has since gone on to do so much work. It's just quite impressive. And he's a multidisciplinary writer. He's written for television, including work on the FX show Legion and also the CBS network drama Tracker, Manhunt on Apple TV. He's a best-selling author. Books like Big Time, Golden State, The Quiet Boy, and Underground Airlines. My favorite title, Sense and Sensibility, and Sea Monsters. And we talk quite a bit about his creative process, about what WashU taught him with his major in drama and minor in history. And I am just so excited to bring this episode to you. It was a delightful, delightful interview. I am quite grateful to Ben Winters for his time. I am now bringing that episode to you. So I will stop talking. He will start talking. To our 4 listeners, thank you for listening and enjoy. My guest today on the PAD podcast is Ben Winters, author, writer extraordinaire. Ben Winters. I've been so excited in researching you to talk to you today. So thank you for being on the PAD podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. What a treat.
Just for those listening, sometimes I take an agonizingly long time to edit these podcasts. We are, let's see, June 23rd. It's, at least here in St. Louis, it's quite hot. It's in the 90s, upper 90s. So this may not come out until we get the winter coats out, but we are here in the summertime. And I'm just so delighted to talk to you, Ben. I would love to just get started by asking you like how you landed at WashU growing up in Maryland, and how did WashU land on your radar, and what made it seem like the right choice for you?
Man, we'd have to go many years back to recall the thought process. I have to say, it's funny because my own eldest child is preparing to go off to school in the fall, so this has all been it's all
Oh,
top of mind. But
sure.
yeah. But no, I think so I grew up in Potomac, Maryland, in Montgomery County, in the DC suburbs, and for whatever reason, it was a popular choice at my high school, Winston Churchill High School, and I there must have been a guidance counselor who put it in front of me. I think that I was looking for a school of about this size in a city, but still a campus. Not a campus that was sort of integrated into a city, but that had its own world. And I think I liked the feel of it. And I had an older cousin who was there when I was applying. I think he
Oh,
was or is 3 years older than me. So I went and visited, and I think that's right. I think that's sort of how I landed there. I just got a
wow.
vibe from it.
You kind of crashed on your cousin's couch or something like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that's right or if I'm imagining that. And he had graduated before I was applying, but I think anyway, in any event, I definitely had a cousin who had gone there and had a good experience, and in the English department as well, which is where I ended up. So yeah, that's as much as I can really recall of that.
Sure. You
Yeah.
mentioned English is where you ended up. Was that your intention going in, or were you like, did you have
Oh, who the
dreams
hell
of
knows?
pre-med type
Who the
things,
hell?
or?
No, I was never intrigued by pre-med, believe me. But I don't think I really had a super solid plan. I think I always wanted to be a writer of some sort somewhere in
Hmm.
my mind. So probably, I was also probably drawn to the creative writing program and for opportunities for performance. I think I'd always liked doing theater stuff. So
Sure.
all of those aspects drew me. But yeah, I was an English major. And I think I knew that pretty early on. I took a lot of English and writing even in
Got
my
it.
freshman year.
Got it. Still have a
Yeah.
very strong English program, English department here at WashU.
Amazing.
So
Good to
that
hear.
hasn't changed much. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been a lot of changes, but that hasn't changed. So you were also involved extracurricularly. I think you were involved in Mama's Pot Roast. Do I have that
Very
right?
much so. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
very involved. Mama's Pyros was, it's funny, when I think back to WashU, I think many of my strongest memories, many of my happiest memories also were in the comedy group in Mama's Pyros, which was, so I arrived at WashU in the fall of 1994.
Hmm.
I believe Pyros had been founded 2 or 3 years before that.
Ah,
When there's a guy named Nick Tamarkin who founded it with a guy named Peter Sarsgaard, who
uh-huh.
went on to be a
I've
quite
heard of
famous.
him.
Yep. And one or two other people. But I think that Nick had been a freshman when they founded it, and Sarsgaard and the others had been seniors. So whatever. This is all minutia, but basically when I got there and I auditioned and got in as a sophomore, so the group was pretty young. I believe, to my knowledge, it is still going strong, which makes me very
It
happy,
is.
very
It
proud.
very
And there's
much
an
is.
alumni email list, and so every once in a while I hear from folks, and it was foundational for me as a writer that the comedy group, which was sort of not part of the PAD, but definitely sort of integrated and related to it, and there was a lot of crossover. That was like a big part of my experience at WashU was doing the
Got
comedy
it.
stuff. Yeah,
And
and
was
then
that
I
prime?
wrote for the school paper too. That was my other big thing at WashU
Oh, nice,
was
nice.
writing
Yeah,
for the
the
paper.
student life paper.
Yep,
Gotcha. Any
yep.
specific area of student life?
I
Oh, you
had
had
a
a column.
column. I had a
Nice.
sort of I had a sort of dopey humor column that I wrote that was a big part of figuring out a kind of a little bit of a persona and a style, and also just the grind of writing on deadline, which is an important part of being a professional writer, is
Sure.
having to get something in at the time you say it's going to be in. And this is like, this is back when I don't know what student life is now, but like, it was very much there was no website. It was just all print publication.
Of
And so
course. Yeah, yeah.
like it was like by the time they'd send it off to the printing press, you had to have the 800 words or whatever was composed. So that was a good experience.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And your involvement going back to Mama's Pot Roast, was it primarily as a writer for sketches or were
No,
you
it's all
also on
improv.
stage?
All improv. Yeah,
All
no,
improv.
there was no writing. I mean, there
Nice.
was rehearsal and there's performance. So no, it was both. It was learning the craft of improv, which is a very specific theatrical thing, but then also yeah, you're getting up in front of people and taking
No.
those risks of
Fantastic.
learning, which is a big part of any kind of creative endeavor. So
Nice.
it was
Nice.
foundational for me. It
And so
means
you're
a lot.
basing yourself at this stage of your life in the English department, but did you also have interactions or did you audition for shows in performing arts?
I did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I was in a performance of Romeo and Juliet,
Oh, nice.
directed by Henry Schwey, who you mentioned before we got started, just retired. So he was the head of the drama department, theater department, whatever you call it. So I was in that. It's possible that was the only official PAD production I was in as an actor. I was never really an actor. I never really had the commitment to being an actor per se. I love doing the comedy stuff. I did a lot of like I had a stupid like a two-person comedy group I was in that we wrote comedy songs and and opened for the a cappella groups sometimes. Like I'm sure they're still there, all the a cappella groups. So we would inexplicably we were invited on a few occasions to open and we wrote these ridiculous songs and it was so fun. But so in terms of official PAD involvement, I think it was mostly Romeo and Juliet. And neither was I one of the stars of Romeo and Juliet. I was one of the guys in the opening scene who goes, do you bite your thumb at me? No, sir, but I do bite my thumb at you. Those two guys. I was one of those guys.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah,
So you graduated with a degree in English, yes?
correct. And a
And
minor in
any
history.
minor in
Yep.
history.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Has that minor in history kind of helped you as a writer as
Yes.
you've progressed?
100%.
Really?
100%. In
And
ways
what?
that I had not anticipated. But one
Huh.
thing, two things. One thing specifically is that a novel that I wrote in 2000 it came out in the summer of 2016 was called Underground Airlines, which was a speculative fiction a novel of an alternate history of America. So in writing the book, I did a lot of history. I did a lot of history research. And so I've always loved history. And I think that my time at WashU totally sort of nailed that down for me a little bit. And it was super useful. And then I think any good writer, well, I won't say any good writer. I think as a novelist, for me, a big part of my process is in doing research, whether it's history or anything else. Like I wrote this book called The Last Policeman. That's again, it's a mystery novel, but it's a science fiction book in that it has to do with an asteroid that's coming to the Earth. It's on the way, basically. The book takes place in the last 10 months of life on Earth as this asteroid steadily approaches. But so to write the book, I had to do all this research about how asteroids really work and like how they calculate trajectory and velocity and all that stuff and what it would do to the economy. And I had to learn about the economy. And so learning to be an effective researcher, which I did through in large part. Now I'm making these connections as we talk. I don't think I've ever really thought about this in this kind of detail, but like being a history minor helped with all that. It helped me think about the world as a subject for exploration.
Oh, that's fascinating. I find that
Yeah.
really interesting, particularly as a parallels designer. I find myself falling down rabbit holes of visual research. I'm like, oh, I never knew this is what this village in England looked like. I'm doing two shows right now, and they're both set in England.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
both shows are actually blending in my head. I just asked the director for one of the shows yesterday, like, when they pick a flower outside the windows, she's like, they don't do that. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, oops.
I bet you discover as a designer, what I certainly do as a writer is that the joy or the power of doing the research is that you don't know what you don't know, right? So you go
Yeah.
in looking for an answer to question X, and then you go, oh, wait a second, there's this whole other thing I didn't even know to be asking. And like
Yes.
that opens up another sort of avenue of exploration, which is, I mean, that's just really fun. It's like that's how things get better and deeper is by it's just asking questions and then, and by the way, this is a whole tangent, but the whole thing with AI that drives me nuts is like, oh, well, now you don't really have to do that research. You just type it in and all come like it's the actual physical act of looking shit up. Oh, am I allowed to say shit? I don't know.
No, you can see. Yeah.
Okay, great. It's the actual fucking act. No, it's the actual act of looking things up that it sparks something. And I think that that spark is like super valuable and not to be
It
taken.
is.
Yeah.
It is. I'm always encouraging. They don't do much anymore, but my design students, again, there's a parallel that I find kind of interesting is that the real hard work of researching, at least visual research, for me, at least coming up as a young student, a design student, was going to the library and getting a number out of the card catalog
Yeah.
and then finding, let's say if I'm in the TR section, which is photography, I'm maybe looking for Richard Avedon, but I never thought about looking at, Ansel Adams, and
Yeah.
they're right
Whoever's
next to
next
each
over.
other. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
so
incredible.
it's
How-
incredible. And I used to
Yeah.
find, I guess, if you think of it that way, almost like you would in terms of music, I used to find some of my favorite photographers by accident. Like
Yeah.
I would just find
Yeah.
I'm like, wonder what this is a much better book when it comes to visual research. Let me see who's in that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Those happy accidents are really cool. And I think it's something that we put at risk when we make things too efficient and too easy that like
yeah,
remove the possibility for screwing up in a fruitful way or for
exactly.
stumbling across things by making dumb mistakes that I don't know, there's a it's like, yes, it is very possible there are mechanisms for discovery that are more efficient and more
Yes,
intelligent, quote unquote, but there are moments when the lack of intelligence or the inefficiency leads to, in some way, an incredible outcome.
absolutely. I'm gonna write. I just wrote down screwing up in a fruitful way. I
Yeah, there you
love that
go.
because that's
There you
exactly.
go.
It's sort of happy accidents.
Yeah. Yeah, let's
There's
put
a
that on a t-shirt.
exactly. It's a famous designer named Bob Israel who had a pencil fall into his model once, and he had the wherewithal to sort of pause and look at what it looks like before pulling it out. The accident. And
Yeah.
he ended next thing you know, like scenic artists are making a 40-foot long pencil or something like that in
Oh,
this big
I love
opera
it.
because he just
I love
found,
it.
it's those kind of accents you just never know.
I
Um,
feel like there's a I feel like there's a story like that about the invention of the ice cream cone. I might be crazy,
I
but I
think
think
you
I
might
think
be
there's
right.
I'm serious. Yeah, I think it was in St. Louis actually, at the World's Fair, but I'd have to go look that up.
I love it. I love it. We'll add that in. We'll fix that in post. We'll add
Yeah,
that
fix it
little
in
bit of
post.
information in.
Or if I'm wrong, just take it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So, jumping in here to say that Ben Winters is indeed correct. The ice cream cone was invented essentially by Ernest Hamwi, who was a Syrian immigrant. He was rolling waffle like pastries at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair when an ice cream vendor, he helped him out. This ice cream vendor ran out of dishes to help his friend, his struggling ice cream vendor friend. He rolled some waffles and they invented the ice cream cone. I know that's why you listen to this podcast, is ice cream cone trivia. There you go. So tell me a little bit about after WashU. Where did you, how did you get your career started? Did you leave St. Louis?
I think I'm still getting my career started. So it was a bunch of bounces. I went from St. Louis to Chicago actually. As in funny, and speaking of Mama's Pot Roast, almost a pipeline. There had been a bunch of people. Nick Tamarkin, who I mentioned, had ended up in Chicago. He was one of the founders of the group. So had a couple other people that I loved. A guy named Matt Craig, a woman named Danny Scher, who sadly just passed recently. God rest her soul. So some other alumni that I knew from WashU, from the comedy group in particular, it was sort of a thing to go to Chicago to watch, to like do improv, do stand up, kind of do theater in that world because Chicago was and is a very fruitful theater town, right? Like a very fervent theater town. So I moved to Chicago. It just felt like, okay, I'm going to do this. So that was the fall after I graduated. So that would have been fall 98. I lived there for a few years, kind of bounced around doing some comedy stuff. I started writing for an alternate weekly newspaper. Um, and then I moved to New York. I mean, I'm skipping a lot of things as one does, but
That's
basically
okay.
with Chicago and then New York. And in New York, I started writing plays, and I wrote plays and musicals, and I worked for a website, and I hustled to make a living.
Hmm.
And I actually collaborated for a long time with another WashU alum named Steve Sislin on musicals. And then I started a family, And then seriously, and then I got married. I'm skipping over stuff, but basically
You're
there was a
skipping.
moment. Yeah, I basically there was a moment when it becomes harder and harder as all artists. You face these moments of reckoning where it's like theater is so delightful and I loved it so much, and it's so hard to make a living,
Yeah,
particularly once you have little kids and you're talking about a world that is, as you know, like nights and weekends. You know what I mean?
of course.
Rehearsals. So it just got really tough. And somewhere around there, I started writing fiction, and I think I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was basically a children's book I started, a middle grade novel I started writing that I think was from an idea I'd had for a musical that didn't go anywhere, something like that.
Hmm.
And basically, I started sending it around, and I got an agent who was interested, but then I had to do more work on it. It's just one of those things. Yeah, that's sort of the short version. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I basically, at some point, I slowly shifted from writing for the theater into writing fiction. And then some years after that, because some novels of mine, and one in particular, had been optioned for television and nothing
Hmm.
had happened with the option, I got very curious about how this world works, how the world of television works. And so I sort of started investigating that, and I ended up writing a pilot script. And so I then sort of added television writing into the kind of into the universe of stuff I do, although trying to do both basically. I don't want to give up writing books because it's important to me and whatever. So I sort of go back.
Yeah.
You know, that and
Well,
that's the short version.
I mean, what I find really amazing about you is that you're not just a writer, you're a writer of virtually, I can't think of anything that you haven't written in terms of genre. You've written poetry, you've written plays, you've written musicals, you've written novels, you write for TV and film. Like it's all over. And
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, but not. I mean, thank you. I should say thank you. I mean, and yes, and the truth is like, yes, I've written for a lot of different media. I guess what do you say, mediums, and primarily, I think of I identify I identify as a novelist, but over the course of my career, I have written for theater. I've written stand-up comedy. I've written music and musicals and television, obviously. I haven't yet written a movie, but I'm thinking about it, and I haven't
Sure.
for a while. I mean, and I think that goes to show a couple things. One is that I would probably be better at any of these things if I had just focused on it, or just I think that there's something to be said for digging in and being single-minded.
uh,
But there's also, I think, just maybe it's the nature of my personality. Maybe it's I don't know what it is, but I get restless. I like to do different things. I like to have different pots on the stove in different places. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, and also as a professional matter, it is useful because all of these businesses are cyclical, and the nature of success in any of them is cyclical. So I haven't sold a novel this year, but I have a TV pilot in development. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
haven't like, and we were talking before. I also write for Audible. I can do these Audible originals, and so you just create these. If you're lucky, as I have been on and off, like you can create these sort of different pipelines or different areas that you can turn to and see, well, maybe I can get something cooking over here if so far this year I haven't been able to get something cooking over here, you know?
Right, right. I just find that fascinating because, again, I mentioned before we started recording that I teach a creativity class, and we hear this a lot from students. I have students come to me and they say, "I just have so many interests," and they always think it's a negative,
No.
and yet I think it's such a positive. I'm like, that's a feature, not a bug. Don't sell yourself short. I usually share a book with them by David Epstein called Range, and it's all about the power of being a generalist, and he generally does a lot of his research when it comes to sports. He compares Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Tiger
Mm,
Woods, who of course is a specialist from age 2, right? We remember him
yep.
on the Tonight Show, I think, playing golf at age 2. But then there's Roger Federer, who played all kinds of sports before he ever touched a tennis racket,
Yeah.
and so many of us are like that. And I think, if you don't mind me saying, your career is you leverage your talents in different areas to make you a better writer overall, in my
Thank you.
opinion.
I hope that's true because
Yeah.
there's always the danger too that it's a diffusion of one's energies in too many different directions. And I think when it works, it really works. Like because also
Right.
professionally and creatively, that I get excited about things, and that excitement then kind of rolls over into other things, right?
Yeah, of course.
The analog in philosophy is Isaiah Berlin, the Fox and the Hedgehog. Have you heard of the Fox and the Hedgehog?
No,
So
I don't think I have.
basically, the fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one great thing. And so he's talking about, he was comparing, I think, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, that like, and other Russian thinkers, that Tolstoy knew and wanted to write and think about everything. That's why that's why War and Peace has romance in it and Anna Karenina has war in it. Like these
Yeah.
books are and like there's whole sections in Anna Karenina that are all about Levin tilling the fields. And it's just like that's because Tolstoy was really interested in tilling fields. And well, it's like, okay, but I'm trying to read this book right now, Mr. Tolstoy. And then Dostoevsky was single-minded. He was so interested in whatever the morality tale was of each book he was writing, whatever. So
Right.
and you can extend that and think about the world in those categories. There are some people who are so good at one thing and they're so tunneled into it, and their brilliance just sparks out. And there's other people who flit a little more from thing to thing. And I'm
Wow.
definitely one of the latter. And there's authors I admire. Like there's a mystery writer named Lee Child, right? He wrote Reacher, and he's just written 35 Reacher books, and they're
Yeah.
all great. And like people love them, and that's just what he does, you
Right.
know? Yeah, or like, all right, one more example, like in music you can be like I love Elvis Costello. He's my favorite, right? And part of what makes him amazing to me is that he made, a handful of albums in the late 70s and early 80s that were one thing.
Yeah.
They were sort of new wave punk, and that was his thing, and he was well known for it. And then he went to Nashville and recorded a country album. And then
Yeah.
recorded Get Happy, which is a soul album. He just was like, I want to do this, I want to do this. And I don't care necessarily if people are like, wait, I thought you were this one thing. It's
Yeah.
because he wants to go where his imagination wants to go, and he trusts that his audiences will find him there. You know, I think
Absolutely.
that's a cool way to think about one's career if you can get away.
Yeah. That would add to that list Steve Martin, someone who's
For
a
sure.
bluegrass singer and writer, and he's an art
For sure.
collector. He also
For
collects, I
sure.
mean, like the guy,
And he
he's a
writes
Renaissance
prose. He
man.
writes like funny prose, and he writes serious prose. And
Writes
like he
plays.
just,
Yeah.
he just he, one only gets one life, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
goal is not the goal is to do what if whatever to the extent that it's possible to not allow yourself to be contained, you know?
Yes. That's what our students need to hear. So thank you for that. I left off one thing when it comes to your multiple genres of talents. You're just releasing this summer, I believe, a comic novel. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually a comic. Yeah, it's less impressive than that. I mean, comic book. It's funny. My brother was like, "Where can I get your graphic novel?" I'm like, "Actually, it's not a graphic novel. It is just a comic book. It is a 3-issue comic book series."
I love
Okay,
it.
which and
Okay.
these are technical terms. A graphic novel just means it's a book length comic, and this is just a comic book. It's 3 issues, but it's more than that. It's more than just a comic book. It's a sci-fi adventure story basically that's
Nice.
told over these 3 issues. It'll be in total, it's like 99 pages, and then next year, if knock on wood, it'll come out as a combined, trade paperback they call it. Where it's
Nice. In this
yeah,
instance, though, are you collaborating with an artist who's
yes, I am.
drawing,
Yeah, I'm
essentially
not an
taking your
artist.
words? Oh, that's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's super cool. And this is my first, yeah, this is me entering into a new media. Like, so my first time doing comics. And I fucking love it. I mean, I found it to be so exciting and so inspiring. And yeah, you write a script essentially. It's funny, like creatively, it falls a little bit between the art of writing a book and the art of writing a television script because you are writing really a script, a blueprint, or like a play. Like as you know, as a designer,
Sure.
the script for a play is not a finished work of art. I mean, it
No.
is in its way, but it's also a blueprint for other
Right.
artists to enter in and do their thing and elevate it and
Yeah.
expand it and make it more resonant and add their
Yeah.
intelligence to the controlling intelligence. So that's what this is. It's like I write this script, and then this genius, in this case, Leo Max, who's French and he's amazing. But so he takes
Nice.
the script and he illustrates it, and then there's a colorist, which is a
Oh,
whole
wow.
other field of endeavor in comics, and the
Wow.
letterer. The letterer is the person who writes the dialogue, and they use different fonts or styles depending what character is speaking, and they figure out where to lay the emphasis. It's amazing.
Oh,
It's amazing. So
wow.
I'm finding it super inspiring and cool, and I want to do it.
Huh.
Unfortunately, it's not as remunerative as television
Fair. Fair.
books, but that's okay. It is sparking joy in me, and I'm trying to roll that over into other things. And and as long as we're talking about like the business side of things, when you
Yeah.
create something like a comic or a short story or an audible piece, even though it isn't necessarily life-changing money, you're creating IP, which means that now,
Mhm.
I have this story that circulates, and of some movie producer might be like, oh, hey, this is my movie producer voice. That could be a good movie. It's like, and then maybe they circle around and you make a relationship there, and then maybe you could pitch them something else. So it's this kind of, you know,
Yeah.
every new idea is an opportunity to expand one's network of other possibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I think that, you're being a generalist in that case is a strength, I think. So,
And yeah, I guess
um,
it is. It is. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'm curious, and this may be a dumb question, so I'll edit this out later if it is.
I doubt
But
it.
when you sit down to write, do you know? Well, let me preface this with a little story. I designed a show some years ago that was a brand new play, and it was called Jesus Hates Me. It was set on a Bible-themed miniature golf course in Texas.
I love it.
The 17th hole, the 18th hole being the resurrection, of course. And so this play guy by a guy named Wayne Lemon, who's now a good friend, he initially wrote it as a screenplay, and he went
Hmm.
and pitched it, and everybody kept turning him down. And somebody said, "This isn't a screenplay; it's a play." And so he's like, "All right, fine." And he
I'll
started
take
taking
it.
it to
Yeah.
theaters.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Next
Yeah.
thing you know, the Denver Center is producing it, and I'm designing it. But so, do you know? Using that as an example, do you know what you're writing when you're writing? Like, do you have do you go to work, I guess, is the question, and sit down and write? But when you're doing it, do you know what it is you're writing? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I think what the question you're asking is a new idea. Does it come into life and go, oh, I'm a comic book or
Yes, yes.
yes and no. By the time I start really working on something in earnest, I know what it is. But there have been various times, multiple times, even recently, I can think of that I've thought of an idea and wasn't sure until I played around with it a little bit, or until I tested the marketplace with it, as your playwright friend did, that I would discover what it is meant to be, what it's actually going to be. Like, for example, this comic book Benjamin that's coming out. First issue just came out in June. By the time your listeners hear this, I gather it will all be out. But it started as an idea for a novel for sure. And I was playing around with it, trying to figure out how to get it where the novel would start. And then I happened to have a lunch with a friend of mine who had just become the publisher of a comic book company. And he was sort of like, have you thought about? And I was like, whoa. And immediately I was like, oh, you know what? This totally makes sense as a comic. Let's try it. And
I
there's
love
another
that.
I had recently for a novel that I tried to sell and we couldn't really get any bites on it. It's a very odd idea. I would have had to go off and write the whole thing and sell it. And so we were trying to sell it on a partial, whatever. It's a whole story. But basically, I haven't found a buyer for it. And I just recently thought, you know what? Maybe I'll try now that I have this hopefully new skill. Maybe I'll try to write this as a graphic novel, or whatever. So that's happened in different times. And I'll always have ideas for books that I'll be like, oh, that might actually be a good TV pilot or vice versa. So,
I love that. I'm kind of fascinated with the creative process across disciplines. Some years ago, Frank Gehry did a documentary, and Sidney Pollack directed it. I don't know if you know
yeah.
this piece, but it's a wonderful documentary. And I remember the opening lines of this documentary where Sidney Pollack is like, for years, people were trying to get Frank to do a documentary, and then he approached me because he was a friend and said, "I want you to do a documentary about me." And Sidney said, "First of all, I don't know anything about making documentaries, and second of all, I don't know anything about architecture." And Frank said, "That's why you're perfect."
Amazing.
So,
The other great
and
story about this is that Larry McMurtry, he tried to write Lonesome Dove as a movie. It was supposed to be a movie. And it
ah,
was a screenplay and there was actors attached to it and then it fell apart and then it fell apart again. And then he was like, fuck this. And he wrote a novel. And if you've read Lonesome Dove, I mean, which one should, like,
sure.
it's extraordinary. And it's
Yes.
extraordinary as a novel. And it's just like he just needed the right, whatever it was, the universe lined up for him to write
Yeah.
the book instead. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. He had a square peg looking for a round, he had a round
exactly,
hole at first
exactly.
and found the right hole. That was a
Exactly.
terrible analogy, but
I'll
we'll
take
edit
it.
edit that out. Well, I'm just so delighted to chat with you about things like this, and very excited for you about your forthcoming comic coming out.
You.
And so I'm just so grateful to you for spending the time to do this with the four listeners that I joke about.
It's my
um,
pleasure. It's I like talking about creativity almost more than anything.
ah,
So and I'm glad to I know it's I know when people are figuring out what they want to do with their lives, there's pros and cons to entering into a creative life. And it's funny because my kids now, I have three kids who are teenagers, and it's like, would I advise them to do this? Is it because I'm lucky and I've had good breaks and bad breaks, and like I'm
yes,
one is never as happy with one's career as one wants, but like I recognize that like, but there's lots of drama in it and there's lots of heartache, and like
yeah,
on the other hand, you get to create things that move other people, and even if it's just one
yes.
person one time, like that's a pretty great thing to be able to do, you
It
know?
is. You're a New York Times bestseller. You're got this amazing career, and I would like to think, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have to also have a certain amount of courage to do this. Like to just sort of believe in your own creative talents and sort of generate work that people, like you said, is going to bring them joy or move them in some way. That's an
I
incredible.
appreciate that, but I also hasten to say that like we live in a world where there are there's like real courage out there. Like there are people right
Yes,
now who are like exhibiting real courage as they, not to be too political, but like we live in uncertain times.
we do.
There's people exhibiting real courage as they face up against, you know,
Yeah.
real danger. And like so I don't really accept that I'm courageous. Maybe stupid is the better word. Maybe
Uh,
like maybe naive. Maybe just naive
yeah.
enough to get away with it
Yeah.
as I
Maybe
have.
I'll rephrase it as a belief in your abilities, that you
I
have
guess so.
this belief in your abilities that when you sit down, that as the classic sort of fear of the blank page, for an
Yeah,
artist,
yeah, yeah.
like that you sit down and you're going to create something that's going to make people happy or sad or whatever it might be, to make, write a story that's going to move them.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that at least I've figured out how to every day confront and move past the fear of not
mm,
being able to figure out what to write, because
yeah.
that's what's scary. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I'm reminded of something, I just because it's present day, and I'm just finished writing something yesterday that's going to be for produced for something called the Playwrights Realm for young playwrights, and it's set designers sort of take on what a playwright should focus on and not focus on. And one thing I one thing I was struck by was a play I designed some years ago in San Francisco by Richard Greenberg, and it's a play called The Dazzle. And
Oh,
he,
yeah.
do you
I
know
know
this
the
play?
devil. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so the page 4 of that script is by Richard Greenberg, says, "This play is about the Collier brothers, of whom I know nothing."
Yeah.
And that's just a great way to start. Like, hey, this isn't a documentary, this is a play. I'm writing about characters. Don't check me for accuracy. Like, it's
Yeah.
the kind of thing that I feel like that gave him artistic license to just write anything. Yeah.
And that's
So
not his responsibility to writing and
exactly.
writing. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
different job. It's a
I thought
different
that was
job.
a great way to set the table for what people were about to hear or see,
So I should put that at the top of everything I write. This is about whatever, about which I know nothing.
about which I know nothing.
Yeah.
Well, Ben Winters, thank you so much for being on the PAD podcast. I really can't wait to publish this and have our listeners hear your great wisdom that you have had to share today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. My many, many thanks to Ben Winters for joining the PAD podcast, for a bit of a window into his process, into his writing, into his career, and into his time at WashU. Thank you for listening.